Hello, everyone. Finally, the President Trump has officially signed the order to impose import tariffs on two neighboring allies, Mexico and Canada. At the same time, America's biggest trade enemy, China, has not escaped this punishment. The reason given is that these three countries have allowed banned substances to enter the U.S., and the borders of the two countries have allowed immigrants to pour into the U.S. So, who will benefit from this punishment? Let's analyze it together. First, to make it easy to understand, we must divide it into advantages and disadvantages and take China as an example because in fact the tax rates imposed on countries are different, but in terms of impact, it still follows the same principle. Among the three countries, China, despite being a trade enemy, seems to be taxed the least, only 10%. Mexico and Canada are taxed terribly high, up to 25%. Actually, to be a bit more precise, the 10% tax on China here is an additional 10%. Previously, during Mr. Trump's first term as president, the U.S. imposed very high taxes on China, and under Mr. Biden's administration, some goods continue to have taxes increased by up to 50%. So now, with another 10%, Chinese goods are indeed facing a huge tax rate. But how will such tariffs affect things? Let's consider the American people first. We will see that the American people will certainly buy more expensive goods. Imagine that you are an American citizen. For a long time you have two shirts to choose from. One shirt from China costs $190 and one from the US costs $200. Although the two shirts have the same material, the same size and shape, but the Chinese, due to large-scale production lines, cheap labor, so the price is the cheapest. If you are an average American, you need to carefully calculate all expenses, then most people will choose the Chinese shirt because it is cheaper. But now it's different. Chinese shirts are taxed 10%. The selling price must increase by at least $20 and it will go up to $210. So, when you choose the cheaper shirt as the American shirt, then in general you still have to buy more expensive goods than before. Not to mention, there are some items that only have Chinese goods, so you are forced to buy, and at a higher price than before. There is another scenario where the Chinese side will accept the tax, but still maintain the original price. For example, when selling a $190 shirt, they have to pay $90 in tax, making a profit of $100. However, after the tax is imposed, in order not to lose customers, Chinese manufacturers agree to offset that tax money into the profit, meaning they still sell the shirt for $190, but the profit is only $81 after deducting 10% tax. However, this case is quite rare because Chinese goods have long been overvalued. They accept to make up for the quality with quantity. Now reducing more profit, they will have nothing to eat. Not to mention that profit they also have to share with the advertising parties, distributors, so it is difficult for this case to happen. So, what are the visible benefits? We see that the U.S. government gets more tax money, so the U.S. government will be the beneficiary. Because since the imposition of tariffs on each shirt imported from China, the U.S. government will receive an additional 10% tax. Thereby, the U.S. will have revenue to pay for public spending activities. However, where does that money come from? It actually comes from the pockets of the American people. Because the increased tax will be included in the selling price, the American people are naturally the ones who have to pay this additional amount. So the money of the American people flows into the pockets of the U.S. government. It seems that the total national assets will not increase. America will not become richer. But does raising tariffs bring the benefit of opportunity for American businesses to compete as the price of Chinese goods naturally increases by 10%? Many American businesses that have been selling 5% more expensive than China now become 5% cheaper. When many American businesses compete better, they will naturally develop, creating more jobs. That is what Mr. Trump promised. And another benefit is that Americans will save more because when goods are expensive, how can people dare to spend as before? Thus, people will have more savings, which will help people avoid debt, as well as indirectly help reduce inflation. But the matter of saving is not necessarily good from an economic point of view, because moderate saving is good, but excessive saving will stifle the economy. This depends on the specific level of spending we will discuss in another video about economics. Okay, now let's consider the situation of how other countries will retaliate when the U.S. imposes tariffs. Being subjected to tariffs can cause thousands of businesses to go bankrupt. For example, Canada sells 80% of its produced goods to the US, and now with a 25% tariff increase, they have to raise prices. But there's a limit to how much they can raise prices before people stop buying. For example, if before a pumpkin cost $10, now it costs $12.5. And it's not like you only buy it once or twice. You have to buy food every day, so it will be much more expensive than before. Then buyers will switch to buying from other brands or give up and not eat that item anymore. Either way, that business will definitely suffer losses, and if the losses are too great, it will lead to bankruptcy. If the US forces businesses into bankruptcy, then of course these countries will have to retaliate. China says they will retaliate, but they haven't specified how yet, while Mexico and Canada have announced that they will impose tariffs on the US to the very end, going all in with this dry-blood approach. Now there's a situation where both sides are imposing tariffs on each other, so Canadian goods can't be sold to the US because of high tariffs, and US goods also can't be sold to Canada because of high tariffs. So gradually, countries will move their goods back to their own countries to sell. Whoever produces it will consume it themselves. But this will not be good for global production. Because according to the theory of specialization, whoever is good at something should produce that thing, then sell it to others to get money to buy what they need, which will help society develop. For example, if Mr. X is good at producing corn and Mr. Y is good at producing pork, then they should focus on their expertise and then sell to each other when needed. If Mr. X is forced to raise pigs and Mr. Y has to grow corn, then obviously productivity will decrease, and both of them will suffer losses. Not to mention, when considering the global and national factors, there will be hundreds and thousands of unique items like that. Therefore, the impact will be even more unpredictable. In general, I hope that countries can find common ground so that the whole world can develop instead of retaliating against each other with trade sanctions like now. Thank you for watching the video. Goodbye and see you again.